to another episode of the Club Life podcast. I'm Michelle Rummery, the Senior Media Manager at Clubs New South Wales, and in this episode we're going to take you up to Tweed Heads and into Twin Towns Services Club, which sits right on the border with Queensland. It's a unique club for a variety of reasons, which we'll get into shortly. But first, let's meet today's guest, one of the directors of Twin Towns Services Club, Ragina Rogers. Ragina, welcome.
Hi, Michelle, and thank you so much for having me here today.
Thank you so much for being here. Now, Ragina, you've been a director of Twin Towns since 2021. You also worked at the club in your early 20s, but your very first exposure to the club industry was as a young girl growing up near Dubbo. Tell us about that.
So, earliest memories in the club world was when I was about 6 years old, and there's a town called Yeovil, and in Yeovil there's an oval, and in the oval is the bowls club. So in Yeovil, at the bowls club, was the central of this little country town with a very, very small population. Now, my poppy Buster, he played bowls. My nan Beryl, she also did bowls, but also attended some of the typical country town club vibe, you know, being the centre of all sporting, bowling, preferred venue for community events, including like cards and Red Cross.
And your father also worked in the club industry?
So Dad's interaction with the clubs, let's go fast forward to the late 80s and in Sydney. So in the 80s, it was an amazing time. There were live bands, DJs with smoke machines and rapping with a side of breakdancing too. Dad, Tom Rogers, or AKA Buck Rogers, his best mate Tom Hooper, they were bouncers in the Sydney scene back then. So imagine the mid-80s, Cabramatta Diggers, Revesby Workers, the City RSL or Cheers, the Taxi Club. So as you can imagine, as a young woman, I had amazing access to the Sydney epic nightlife. I definitely contributed to Dad's and Uncle Tom's loss of hair back in those days.
He would have had some stories, particularly working at Revesby Workers. I believe they had Club Troppo back then.
It certainly was. It was amazing. I had sort of front seat access to a lot of the great entertainment and just the vibe and everything. And, you know, don't forget the hair of the 80s and the purple eyeshadow and all that gig, so...
Let's go back before the purple eyeshadow, back to your childhood. You grew up in a small regional town. What was that like?
I went back and forth from Yeovil to Narromine because Nan and Pop were there. Narromine has always been the home base, so we've gone back there. Even today, we go back out to Narromine. The Narromine Bowls Club is always where we go for a family get-together. You've got the golf club and the RSL, where we always come together, and especially in the Aboriginal communities with sorry business and things like that. And the country towns always have that open door, and the whole country town vibe that you get is still there as much as it was when I was 6 years old, which is amazing.
You've mentioned there the small country town and the welcoming nature of those sorts of communities. Not long afterwards, though, when in your earlier years you did move to Sydney and then you moved to the coast in Tweed Heads, how did those different environments help to form your values and your outlook as a young person?
So Mum and Dad separated, and Dad was a New Zealand Māori and Mum was an Aboriginal Wiradjuri woman from freshwater country in Narromine. And when they separated, they both remarried. And I went to Sydney with Mum after spending time in Yeovil, and then back and forth to Mum and Dad. So Mum moved up and married a traditional owner in Tweed Heads. So I spent a lot of time going back and forth and being amongst family and just enjoying that city in Sydney, but still enjoying the country life as well. So going back out home to walk on country.
And what was that like? Because they are quite different lifestyles. How did that impact your outlook on life growing up?
From a teenager, it was really exciting times. And again, because I had the lifestyle of the city and the fun and exciting times, you know, there in the 80s. But then on the Gold Coast in Tweed Heads, you know, having the beautiful beaches and the river and a totally different, more relaxed lifestyle.
Now, Twin Towns was one of your first jobs out of high school, working behind the bar and working in the event space as well. What was the club like back in the 1990s?
Clubs was in my blood. So by the 1990s, 19-year-old me, now living in Tweed Heads, so I applied for the job at Twin Towns. And I say work because I got paid, but it was so much fun and more of a social event with friends, and some of them are very dear to me today. And Dean Bell was my manager. So I mentioned Dean specifically because if you fast forward to this particular week in 2025, I'm sitting with Dean as he received his 40 Years of Service Award. Along with Gary Meakin, he received his 45 years. And even our CEO, Rob Smith, is up there with mere 42 years. So if you look back at my time back at the club then, you've got people like Dean Bell. I learnt from him, it was fantastic, but then they put me into tray service. So in the showroom, 9 times out of 10, I wasn't focusing on doing any tray service or taking drinks. I was too busy watching the entertainment. And I was absolutely hopeless. You'd have a big tray and a coin would indicate around the perimeter of the tray what the drink was and what the spirit that was going with a bourbon and coke, rum and lemonade, for example. 9 times out of 10, I'd be watching the show, trip over, bump all the coins. No one ever got what they ordered. So I didn't last too long in the showroom.
Now, you've mentioned Rob Smith there, who we will come back to in a little while, but the friends that you made weren't the only important relationships that you formed at the club. You also met your husband, Andrew, at Twin Towns. Mm-hmm. How did that come about?
So again, 1990, 1991, I met hubby, Andrew Hughes, aka Howie. I didn't rate him too much back then, actually, because we were opponents on the touch footy field. And if everyone remembers how seriously competitive touch football was in the 1990s, he wouldn't pass the ball, so I didn't rate him very much. But now he rates himself as my biggest achievement, if you're asking him. And he was doing seller work for Twin Town Services Club, Club Benora, and then ended doing juniors just as recent as 2020. And yeah, so I've been with him ever since. So thanks, Twin Towns.
Bringing everyone together, as clubs so often do.
They do.
So you obviously started out in the club industry, but you soon moved on to train as a paramedic, which took you to some really remote areas of the state. What drew you to that line of work?
Being in clubland and being in the community, there was a few incidents where I was the first responder, and I didn't like the fact that I was restricted by my lack of knowledge to provide what I felt was appropriate first aid. So 2003, the kids were still young, but ended up applying and was successful getting into the Queensland Ambulance Service. I was an advanced care paramedic there, and up to 2010 to 2014, I was lucky enough, and I was extremely honoured to be allowed to teach paramedical science in some of Queensland's most rural and remote communities, from Thursday Island to Palm Island to Cherbourg. It was a fantastic opportunity, and it allowed me to contribute to, health provision in remote communities, because instead of taking the cadet out of the community and taking them to the classroom in Brisbane, we took the classroom out of Brisbane and we took it to the remote community. It was a successful pilot program. And then after I left, it became a permanent fixture in Queensland Ambulance.
That must be a real career highlight for you.
It was amazing, actually, to be a part of that entire journey. The troubleshooting around, the real issues that we have in rural and remote areas, from internet connection to basic telephone access and things like that.
You yourself are a proud Indigenous woman. How do you think that's influenced your professional career?
So it did certainly give me the tools at the interface of culture and service provision, let it be clinical or let it be community. So at that interface, it gave me that intrinsic view of what I feel was an expert, because the cultural component is intrinsic. So I then moved forward and went into integrated aged care. I needed a work-life balance when I was away teaching. My 16-year-old daughter decided to do a little bit of rebelling. Didn't have to think twice about it. There was only the one incident, and stepped away from that position. Came back to New South Wales to give what my family needed, was that stability. Came back to New South Wales Health and then worked my way back up by, again, focusing on Aboriginal home care, Aboriginal aged care and community health, to where I am today.
You were drawn back to Twin Towns to join the board in 2021, almost 3 decades after you first started working there. What inspired you to get back into the club industry?
So by this stage, I had completed my paramedical science. I also completed a rural leadership certificate, and I completed my master's degree in governance and leadership. So I'd been doing a lot of work with smaller boards and community groups, upskilling, especially around corporate governance, because during my master's study, corporate governance just really appealed to me. And being in the position where I could contribute to policy change, especially around systemic changes like improving outcomes. I crossed paths with Bob Loring, who is also a board of director. Bob happened to mention to me if I would like to consider a position that something might be becoming available. So he stated that he felt that I would complement the current board's appetite to, improving diversity, and also my academic achievements and my current contribution to local board activities. I went away and thought about it for a while. Bob didn't let it go, and really happy that I accepted, and again was very lucky to be accepted and then voted in by the members.
It sounds like they've been very lucky to have you as well. Take us into that first board meeting. You're an Indigenous woman and you would have been younger than a lot of the other directors, and the club industry traditionally has been a fairly male-dominated space. What was that like?
So two aspects of it would be the Indigenous side of things. So our Indigenous population is roughly 3% of the population. So if we're looking at that from a club's perspective, I do bring in that intrinsic cultural lens to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander social determinants and the transgenerational traumas that may explain certain reactions and behaviours by some of our identified clients and members. To be able to just provide an insight or a consideration. Being Indigenous, I can identify some of these triggers, and there might not just be one determinant, there might be multiple. And being able to bring this to my colleagues and the other board members, and it's a constant education piece. So I learn from them just as much as they learn from me.
The club industry, I did mention that it previously or historically has been quite male-dominated. It has come some way in terms of diversity in the last couple of years in particular. Clubs New South Wales currently has its first female chair in Sally Ann Faulkner, and a female CEO as well with Rebecca Riont. How pleased are you to see how far the industry has come in this area, and how important is it, do you think, on a board to have a mix of directors and executives from all walks of life?
Absolutely. It's great. Twin Towns, for example, we have 280 to 300 staff. 45% of those are female, which is great. We have those long-term staff, which I spoke to earlier with Dean and Gary and Rob, etc. We have over 25% of our staff that have been with us for over 10 years. So it's that environment that they're comfortable with. In regards to women, before me was Sharon Steinman. Sharon was the first female board of director, but we have warmly been received and encouraged to pave our way. A lot of people would be concerned around being selected and it being perceived as tokenistic. So this is one area that I stand very firm on. We are here to complement the board. Our current board is a very diverse board. Like I said, Sharon brings her MBA in business. I bring governance with corporate governance. We've got our long-standing legends, I call them, including our chair, Brian Brown. He leans into transformational leadership. We've got Dr. John Griffin. He's a brilliant academic and knowledge holder of years of multidisciplinary boards, including the hospital. Ken Colpett, whose logistical and strategic high-level management has seamlessly transferred into the board of directors. And Bob Loring, who I spoke to before, he's a strong leader and a community figure. He's respected for his as-it-is attitude and the big voice for the small cohort. If they're the legends, next we've got the trailblazers, which I fall into. So you've got John Keating. He's a lawyer with a young family and brings expertise and clarity. Justin McGurgan, he provides decades of industry knowledge. Sharon Steinman, again, MBA, strategic visionary, like she's amazing, and also our deputy chair. And our latest is Jimmy Thomas. He's already bringing a high-level insight of significant views and really gives a good foundational input. So it's pretty exciting when you talk about diverse groups. It's not just being Indigenous, it's not just being female, it's the other aspects of what we bring and complement each other as a whole. Going to where we were, the old way that the boards used to be, and the moving into the new way of boards, the new way of clubs, the new way of Clubs New South Wales, it takes a really strong leader that's not afraid to embrace change. And that's the really exciting thing about Brian. He embraces our initiatives. There's no stupid question. And I have learnt more sitting across the table from those legends in the boardroom and my new trailblazers than I have in a 3-hour lecture or reading a textbook.
What an incredible lineup. I think you're probably going to have a lot of people applying to join the board soon after that wrap. Let's talk about Twin Towns more broadly. It is quite a unique club in terms of its location right on the border of New South Wales and Queensland. What types of challenges and opportunities does that location present?
The location itself being on the beautiful Tweed Heads. You've got the Gold Coast Airport, you've got the most beautiful beaches in the country, and you've got one of the greatest clubs, being Twin Towns Services Club. And then you've got the, Club Bonora where we've got the golf, and then you've got the juniors as well, which is more, your locals, kids touch footy. And so we provide all of those. In regards to challenges, some embrace daylight savings. Some of us get a little bit frustrated with it because it can mess up your times because you forgot to change your mobile phone. But other than that, the challenges, we manage them.
On the time changes, you mentioned a little earlier before we started recording, you've got quite a unique situation with your own driveway.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
So living right on the border, Piggabeen, at the end of my driveway is Currumbin Hill, so we go straight over to Currumbin Valley. If I haven't preset my mobile phone, my phone will change to Queensland time. So I'll think of that I'm running on time for a meeting and I'm actually running late.
I can imagine it's a very convenient excuse for anyone that is running late that they might rely on that.
I've used it a few times.
Now, I imagine also being on the border, not only the time zone is challenging, but in terms of the COVID lockdown period, we saw on the news in New South Wales the barricades between the two states and people having to hug over those barricades. What was it like during that period?
It was a really difficult time for everyone at that time. Working in health as well, it had its challenges. We had staff that were impacted, living on either side of the border and not being able to cross. I think the main road up from the club, the boundary went right up the middle of the road. We had a staff member living on the left-hand side of the road, couldn't get across. There was a lot of challenges that way that impacted our workforce. But as per usual, what Twin Towns does is the staff just come together. Last week was a perfect example when the cyclone came. When staff couldn't get into work or be available, our other staff stayed over. Our executive team were on call overtime. Whenever they were needed, everyone stepped up to the plate to ensure that ice was provided to the community because we had power, we had electricity, so we had the ice machine. So while it sounds insignificant, you've got people that haven't had power for 5 days. Ice was a pretty important thing to make sure that their food and everything was okay. They could come to the club to connect and speak to loved ones because in some areas we had no phones. But Twin Towns was open and Twin Towns was available, and that was because of the staffing coming together.
Cyclone Alfred, of course, a very good example of clubs stepping up and filling that gap when services are needed by those in the local area. And we do see that time and time again, be it bushfires or drought or floods for that matter.
Even when I worked in the ambulance service, I was stationed in a lot of rural towns and fire, ambos, police, all of the above. We'd all come together at the clubs. If there was an emergency, the emergency location was the club where everyone would be able to come there and be safe.
What do you see as some of the club's main achievements over the past few years during your tenure on the board?
There's been a lot, but to start with, we've got last year, Twin Town Services Club grants. We donated $1.5 million in community giving. We are launching our community choice programs, providing even more funding to our local communities. And again, we're very proactive in our community. We listen to the voice of our members and we try to make sure that it's not just about keeping the doors open, it's about keeping everyone happy. Our entertainment is one of the ones. So we provide some really great entertainment, but even if we go back, like our showroom opened in 1978. And we've seen some really famous artists grace our stage, like Pink. Pink was there in December 2002. Now, that was just before she started her journey to stardom, but, you're welcome, Pink, so let's put that out there. Tina Turner, Roy Orbison, Johnny Cash, Keith Urban, In Excess, Guy Sebastian and Sammy Davis Jr. Now, a funny thing about Sammy Davis Jr. is he actually had 13 shows in 11 days at Twin Towns. So our entertainment definitely is something I'm really proud of. We've always got entertainment. We're always promoting and giving back to our members, which is something that we really take seriously.
I'm sure any up-and-coming musicians will be listening to this and thinking Twin Towns is the place to kickstart their career.
Start it off.
You're very passionate about the Indigenous community as well as providing healthcare to locals. How proud are you of the work that Twin Towns does in both of those spaces?
So one example comes to mind, and in my current role as a General Manager Service Delivery for Australian Unity, one of the profiles that I've had there is Aboriginal Home Health. What Aboriginal Home Health does is they have a statewide Elders Olympics. Now, this is where our most vulnerable identified customers can come together, and have exactly that. It's Olympics. There's Velcro darts, there's volleyball, there's tunnel ball. Very light, but it's not just about the exercising, it's about reconnection to culture, reconnection in some cases to family that they haven't seen for 10 years plus. And it's about the cultural connection. What Twin Towns did last year was we actually held the Olympics at Twin Towns. The stadium was the auditorium. We had the accommodation at the resort, and the Olympics went for 5 days. Now, for some of these elders, and I'm talking, they came out from as far as Dubbo, Orange, there was an auntie from Danton, you know, way out west, had never seen salt water. And this is the first time that they had not only left their town in quite some time, but some cases it's the first time they've ever stepped on sand and seen salt water. And seeing some of them when we took them for walks around the boat harbour, giggling like they were teenagers, was one of the most amazing things. We couldn't have done that without Twin Towns. Twin Towns assisted us with the auditorium and making sure that the second that those buses pulled up, some of them were on the buses for 6 to 8 hours, but that's what they wanted to do to attend this event. As soon as they stepped off that bus, they were made to feel like $1 million. They were treated like a star. They were given the best accommodation, the best food, the best entertainment, and then top it all off with the Olympics. We ended with a gala dinner where they all got to dress up to the hills. And again, Twin Towns catered a 3-course meal, which was just absolutely sensational and spectacular. Best feedback that we could have ever got, but the feedback to me wasn't written, it was written in the smiles. Everybody left with a smile, everyone left with a great memory, and it's thanks to Twin Towns that occurred.
What an incredible experience. When will you be hosting the next one?
We're having them every 12 months, but because we didn't win in Northern, it's now being hosted out west. So yet to be advised.
An event to keep an eye on then.
Yeah, it was the darts and the bingo that we lost it in, so.
You have to get your practice in up at Twin Towns until the next one. Now, as the name suggests, Twin Towns Services Club is there for returned service people. How does it feel to be on the board of a club that services the interests of the veteran community?
As a director, when I came in, it was very new to me around the RSL and veteran world. The respect that we have for them is evident in the close relationships we have with the existing veteran sub-branch, which is directly across from our executive office. Every year, our directors put our hands up to support in any way we can in the Anzac Day celebrations, from the dawn service to ushering kids down while they're doing that very proud march that they do every year, to actually serving our veterans when they're having their lunch, you know, after the services. We support by, you know, live streaming the events that are happening and just being there to support them and making sure that that respect is ongoing and not forgotten. It's my job now to embrace that and carry the baton moving forward. Because while they are an ageing population, the memory still has to move on.
Earlier we touched on Rob Smith. Of course, he's the CEO of Twin Towns Services Club, but he's also a director on the board of Clubs New South Wales. What's it like working with Rob?
He's been with Twin Towns, like I said, for 42 years, and it definitely comes with its perks of having him as our CEO. The knowledge and random information he has accumulated in all those years of service is an absolute asset. His workplace culture, his ethic, and his contribution is evident in the club's success. And also the staff satisfaction, which is currently sitting at like 70%. His experience is nothing like I've ever seen. And I appreciate the way that he delivers his information. Is always professional, it's always on point, and it's always what I need to know. And that's what I need from a good, strong CEO.
And that's what we need on our board as well. So very lucky to have him on board, quite literally. Now, we did talk about Australian unity a little bit before. Obviously, we've got an ageing population here in Australia, so the work that you're doing is vital. Tell us a little bit about the work that you do in trying to keep older people at home for longer, where they feel safe and happy.
In my role at Australian Unity, so I'm currently the General Manager of Service Delivery / Operations. I'm currently working in a transitional period, so I'm working with Southern New South Wales and Victoria, and that is not only providing BAU aged care provision to Australia's most vulnerable peoples. I have been honoured to be the General Manager for Service Delivery for Aboriginal Home Health, which encompasses the whole of New South Wales, some South East Queensland and some Victoria. What that means for me is currently I have 8 direct reports. I have 796 indirect reports, and we care for and coordinate the home health services for over 6,262 customers. So I take my job very seriously, and it's very important that we make sure that our elders, our most vulnerable, stay home as long as they want to stay home or as long as they can. I empower my team to lean into leadership, and I believe that we do the same at Twin Towns as well. The executive team embrace innovation. They pivot where they need to. It's exciting when we get together around our strategic planning, because I know that when you're talking strategic planning, you can always go back to your 12 months, 3 years, 5 years planning. We're thinking 10, 15, 20, like years and years ahead, because we want to ensure that Twin Towns is providing the same community support in every way it possibly can, not just for while I'm here, but for the next generation to come.
You've talked about innovation there, and obviously we've touched on the fact that we do have an ageing population in Australia who do tend to frequent clubs. But on the flip side of that, I suppose the club industry has a challenge when it comes to remaining relevant for younger generations as well, and also appealing to younger people, both in terms of patronage, but also in terms of them considering a career in clubland. Mm-hmm. How do you go about doing that?
We've got some great things happening at Twin Towns. So we've recently launched the Still and Barrel Whiskey Bar. It features like beautiful lounges, live music, and a unique selection of spirits. Club Honora, now that's appealing to families with activities in kids' play areas, cabanas for hire, and we have a broad selection of live music catering for all different tastes. We have standing agendas on our strategic plans for our board of directors. We're constantly embracing the ambitious and the innovative approach to our executive teams to especially focus on those points, those younger demographics, the workforce, and keeping those younger families. So I feel that Twin Towns is doing that, and we're doing it well because we're starting to see those numbers improve, and we're starting to see more of the younger people, being attracted to what we're providing, especially live music. Bringing that back has just been so well received, and it's just a win-win for the club.
Away from work, let's talk about some of your hobbies. I understand that you're a little bit of a reality TV buff.
I do, no judging.
No judgment here, but run us through a few of your favourite series.
Oh my God, it's just the Real Housewives, so all of the above, all of them. I watch them, and it's just really, it's my place to go to so I can just switch off and have a giggle and look at how the other side lives sometimes.
And you're not alone there. You're not the first person on this podcast to admit a reality TV obsession, so
that's great.
You're safety in numbers. Now, we'll finish off with a couple of questions that we like to ask all of our guests on the Club Life podcast. If you had a magic wand and could fix something in the club industry, what would it be?
Reducing the red tape and consistency within states. Let's listen more to the communities. Take the politics out of it, and let's listen to what they need, because they need clubs, and they need clubs to be successful so that they can be there for the tomorrows. We don't know what's around the corner, but what we do know is that rural, remote, regional, urban, the clubs are a place of community. They're a place of meeting. If we could do away with the red tape so we can have that consistency across, regardless of where the club is, especially with the cross-the-border issues. So, for example, not being required to sign in Queensland, but when you take 10 steps over the border and you're in Twin Towns and you are required to sign in, the conversations and having to explain, just such a simple inconsistency across states, but the clubs still look exactly the same, and we're looking out the window to the same view. So why is the red tape different?
Ragina, one last question. Why do you think registered clubs will still be around in 100 years' time?
Because the need will be there. There will always be the need for community. There will always be a need for a safe place to gather. There will always be a need for a social venue. There will always be somewhere where we need to gather and be together. We're social beings. We need to gather, we need to eat together, we need to drink together, we need to socialise, we need to enjoy each other's companies. As long as we need that, that's as long as we're going to need clubs.
That's a perfect note to end on, I think, Ragina. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. Thank you so much for making the time to come on the Club Life podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
Ragina Rogers there, a director at Twin Towns Services Club. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Club Life podcast. We'll be back again in a fortnight with another special guest. If you're a new listener, our back catalogue of episodes is available on clublife.com.au, Apple and Spotify, or wherever else you consume your podcasts. Search for Club Life Podcast to find us and subscribe so that you never miss a new episode. If you have a suggestion on who you think might make an interesting guest, get in touch with the team by emailing clublife@clubsnsw.com.au. Until next time, thanks for listening and bye for now.